that being said, welcome back to Nativ again. We're studying the laws of idolatry from the Rambam from Mishneh Torah, and we're going to start with chapter 10. Maybe sometime in the next 6 years we can get to another section of Mishneh Torah, but that's kind of a joke. But we're getting close. There's just a few more chapters. So without further ado, we'll go into the text. So chapter 10, Halakha 1 says, we may not draw up a covenant with idolaters which will establish peace between them and us, and yet allow them to worship idols, as Deuteronomy 7:2 states, do not establish a covenant with them. Rather, they must renounce their idol worship or be slain. So again, this is one of the laws that refers to being in the land of Israel. And if you read the text of the Torah in Deuteronomy chapter 7, verse 1, it specifically mentions the Canaanite nations. But what the Rambam is inferring here, that it's not just the Canaanite nations, but it's all idolatrous nations, that we're not to establish a covenant with them to make peace if they insist on remaining in idolatrous practice. So in the land of Israel, any nation that's basically, when the Sanhedrin is standing, and all the order of the government of the Torah is ruling the land of Israel, any idolatrous peoples that live, a nation of peoples that lives in that land, we're not to establish a covenant with them unless they renounce their idolatry, and if they insist on keeping their idolatrous ways, they're to be slain.
Or leave.
Or they can leave, exactly. But concerning what the Jewish people would do to them would either be, hey, if you want to have a covenant with us, you have to renounce your idolatry, you have to leave, or we're going to war. So that doesn't apply today, specifically because of the exile. Israel is in a state of galut right now, the exile. So Bezrat Hashem, that will end soon. We'll have the king sitting on the throne, Mashiach ben David, the son of David, the righteous descendant of David, to bring down all the right rulings. And then we'll see all these things come back into place, where Hashem is not only God of the world, and not only God of Israel, but King of the world and King of Israel at the same time.
Also, a good note for that, to bring encouragement to the listener, is idolatry will be completely nullified, and so there will be no idolatry in King Mashiach.
Yes, exactly. The comment was that when Mashiach sets everything in order, that idolatry will be like a bygone idea. I heard Rabbi Singer one time explain that basically it's going to be like when you're in your house and you have a bottle of cleaner under the sink. If you're thirsty, you know it's wrong to drink that bottle of cleaner. It's going to cause you harm. So by common sense, you're not going to go open the cabinet, get out the cleaner, and drink it. It's the same thing with idolatry in the day, or even sinfulness, more or less, in the days when Mashiach is ruling the world. To participate in these behaviors would be akin to going under your sink when you're thirsty and drinking from a bottle of bleach. It just would be ridiculous. Okay. So it is forbidden to have mercy on them, as Deuteronomy states, do not be gracious to them. So accordingly, if we see an idolater being swept away or drowning in the river, we should not help him. If we see that his life is in danger, we should not save him. It is, however, forbidden to cause one of them to sink or push him into a pit or the like, since he is not waging war against us. To whom does the above apply? To idolatrous non-Jews. It is a mitzvah, however, to eradicate Jewish traitors, minim or apikorsim, which minim are heretics. Apikoros are people that, like Gnostics, more or less, Jewish Gnostics that They don't openly deny God, but they don't actually they don't acknowledge the ways of God. So it's apikoros is more like in today's world, like an atheist, someone who doesn't acknowledge God. So also to cause them to descend to the pit of destruction, since they cause difficulty to the Jews and sway the people away from God. And it mentions the name of a certain person that was killed around 2,000 years ago, like so-and-so, and his students. So it says like this man and his students, and Zadok, Betos, and their students, may the name of the wicked rot. So this is specifically talking about apostate Jews that attempt to lead people away from the service, other Jews away from the service of Hashem. They should be eradicated. They're considered traitors. Okay, halakha 2. From the above, we can infer that it is forbidden to offer medical treatment to an idolater, even when offered a wage. So we can infer from above that even if they're going to pay for medical treatment, we should deny them the treatment. If, however, one is afraid of the consequences or fears that ill feeling would be aroused, one may treat them for a wage, but to treat them for free is forbidden. Regarding a ger toshav, since we are commanded to secure his well-being, he may be given medical treatment at no cost. It's important to say that. And I'm sure most of us here know what a ger toshav is, but for the sake of those of us who don't, a ger toshav is a righteous non-Jew who lives amongst the Jewish people. So it basically means a righteous non-Jew who lives in the gates. So he's part of the Jewish people, lives according to the Sheva mitzvot and everything that falls under those categories. He's in an active relationship with serving Hashem. He's in an active relationship with the Jewish people, but at the same time he has no interest or need to convert to Judaism and become specifically Jewish. So very righteous, very holy people, ger toshavim. Gerim toshavim, excuse me. So halakha 3, it is forbidden to sell them homes and fields in Eretz Yisrael. In Syria, one may sell them homes but not fields. One may rent them homes in Eretz Yisrael, provided that a neighborhood of non-Jews is not established. So it's talking about gerim toshavim, righteous non-Jews living amongst Jews in Eretz Yisrael. They may not own property, but the Jewish people can rent them property. If they wanted to live in Syria, then they can own houses, but they can't own the fields. If you think about it, the land itself is the inheritance of the Jewish people. And we're commanded not to let the land go out of our possession. The only time the land goes, it doesn't actually belong to us in reality. It belongs to Hashem. So he's the only one that can legally cause the Jewish people to be separated from the land. And of course, when I say legally, we're talking about the highest legal sense of Torah law, not your regular municipal court. Okay. And also, there should not be neighborhoods established in Eretz Yisrael of righteous non-Jews. The righteous non-Jews should be part of the Jewish neighborhoods. So it says fewer than 3 homes does not constitute a neighborhood. So you can picture having a neighborhood like the subdivisions and stuff here in Kingwood, and you have 10 homes, and up to 8 of them be Jewish and 2 of them be non-Jews, and it's not an issue at all. So the idea is accountability to a degree. The whole nation of Israel And everyone who's attached to it, whether Jewish or non-Jewish, we're all accountable to each other to make sure that we're upholding the laws that Hashem has given us to uphold. It is, however, forbidden to rent them fields. In Syria, one may rent them fields. So why did the rabbis issue more stringent laws regarding fields? Because two difficulties are involved. One removes the obligation of tithes from these fields, and one gives them a resting place in our land. So tithes, ma'aser, the Hebrew word for tithes is ma'aser. Ma'aser is paid on items. A person doesn't give ma'aser from himself, he gives it of the produce. So the ma'aser is on the produce. If you rent the field out to a non-Jew, whatever the case, the non-Jew is not obligated to give ma'aser, but the field should have ma'aser given from it. So by renting it to the non-Jew, the problem is that the field won't be tithed off of. So then possibly the food that comes off, the produce that comes off of it, could be distributed amongst the Jewish people, and it would be food that hasn't been tithed on, and that would make it asur. It would make it not permitted to eat. Everybody follow me there?
So is that the idea of the grapes and the grapevines and kosher grapes and kosher wine? Because there are certain laws and you have for the Sabbath wine that makes the kosher wine.
Yeah, kosher wine is a whole different story other than just tithing. The tithing has part of it, but it's also the way the grapes are handled. And of course we can get into more depth with that during the discussion portion of the class. Okay. Okay, so there's two parts to this with the renting of the land of the fields. So one removes the obligation of tithes, which the land should be tithed from, the produce of the land should be tithed off of, and one gives them a resting place in our land. So the idea is that the land, the nation of Israel, is supposed to be the inheritance, like we mentioned a few minutes ago, the inheritance of the Jewish people. It's not to be the inheritance of other nations. It's supposed to be the inheritance of the the sons of Jacob. It is permitted to sell them houses and fields in the exile because it is not our land. So, having a neighborhood in America where you have Jews and non-Jews living amongst each other, it's very common. Unless someone buys up the whole block, it's kind of difficult to monopolize who lives in the neighborhood. Okay, Halakha 4, even when it is permitted to rent homes to idolaters, it is not permitted to rent to them for use as a dwelling, because they will bring idols into them. So as Deuteronomy 7:26 states, do not bring an abomination into your home. So when you rent your house, if a person rents their house, it's still their house. They're just giving the living rights of the house over to the renter. But at the end of the day, when the rental agreement contract is over, the original owner reestablishes the domain as his. It never leaves his ownership. So it's not permitted for people who serve Hashem to own a house where people bring idols in it. So do not bring an abomination into your home. It is, however, permitted to rent them homes to use as storehouses, like a warehouse or a storage place, somewhere to store things. It is forbidden to sell them fruit, grain, or other produce while it is attached to the earth. One may sell these products after they have been harvested or before they have been harvested on the condition that they will be harvested and he must harvest them. So why is it forbidden to sell them land or anything attached to the land? because Deuteronomy 7:2 states, do not be gracious with them. This phrase can also be interpreted, do not give them a resting place in the land. As long as they do not have a resting place in the land, their stay will be a temporary one. The prohibition also forbids speaking about idolaters in a praiseworthy manner. So people who are involved in idolatry, we're not supposed to compliment them. We're not supposed to elevate their stature. We don't have to be unkind, but at the same time, we're not supposed to tell them, oh, you know, that's a nice shirt. Like I'm kind of known for that, telling guys how nice their shirts are. I don't know why I like nice shirts. So I have to be careful not to tell idolaters that I like their shirt. So anyway, that's a little silly, but at the same time, on my part it's silly, but at the same time, we're not supposed to give compliments to people who are idolaters. We're not supposed to speak about them amongst ourselves in a praiseworthy manner, like, yeah, that guy, he's an idolater, but he sure is a nice person and he'll go out of his way to help you. No, we're supposed to separate ourselves from idolaters. We don't want to cause a war, especially here in the Exile. You know, we don't want to make hard feelings, but we don't really want to elevate the stature of an idolater. Okay. It is even forbidden to say, look how beautiful that idolater's body is. Well, she's an idolater, but she sure is hot. No. Boy, that guy sure is built well. It's too bad he worships idols. Wow. So, so how much more so is it forbidden to praise their deeds or hold their works dear? As the phrase states, do not be gracious with them. This phrase can also be interpreted, do not look at them graciously, for doing so will cause you to draw close to them and learn from their wicked behavior. That's the basis for these laws. Everybody that has any life experience, it doesn't take much life experience to understand that if you hang around with dogs, you're going to get fleas. The dog with the fleas goes around the dogs without fleas. The fleas don't go away, they just infect the other dogs. So we have to maintain a distance from idolatrous peoples because idolatry is appealing. People don't practice idolatry because there's not an appealing thing to it. There's something about it that's attractive to people for some reason. So we're not to be overly familiar. Okay. Also implicit in the above phrase is that it is forbidden to give them a present or gift. A present may, however, be given to a ger toshav, as implied by Deuteronomy 14:21. You may give it to the stranger in your gates so that he may eat it, or sell it to the idolatrous non-Jew. It should be sold to them, not given. So we don't give gifts to idolaters. And we were just discussing this very passage last night. It's talking about nevela, which is, the English translation often says an animal that died of itself, but literally it's an animal that was improperly slaughtered. The kosher slaughter wasn't quite exact, so I gave the example last night. You have the knife for the kosher slaughter, and it has a tiny nick in the blade that you can feel with your fingernail. And it's used to slaughter the animal. That makes that slaughter not kosher. It's an invalid slaughter, but yet every other part of the process was exactly the same as a kosher slaughter, because it's considered that the tiniest little nick in the blade tears the flesh. And one of the 5 things that would invalidate a kosher slaughter would be tearing. So even that little nick causes some type of minuscule amount of tearing, so it invalidates the slaughter for kosher purposes. But yet the animal died in a proper way. All the blood went out. There's nothing physically wrong with the meat per se. So the ger toshav, it's completely permitted for him to eat of this without because non-Jews are not required to keep kosher to the strictest level. So it would be either a gift to give it to the righteous non-Jew that lives in the gates, or it can be sold to the other types of non-Jews. So it's not like this idea where we read that the animal had an illness and it fell over dead and we say, here, eat this.
Or hit by a car.
Right, or hit by a car, exactly. Because even amongst this is pertinent to today's world with Jews and non-Jews. The animal that was hit by a car, when we eat it, Rabbi Yaakov Cohen talked about this a couple of years ago here. The animal that was hit by a car, it's to eat the flesh of that animal is akin to eating the limb torn from a living animal. And then he explained that what the text is saying is you don't eat the limb with its life still in it. Okay, and what is the life of an animal? It's blood. So when an animal is when it's not slaughtered in the proper way for its blood to be released, the blood, the life of the animal, even though it's dead, is trapped in its body. So when we say an animal that died of itself, we're not talking about giving an animal to someone that died of an illness and just fell over, or died of old age, or hit by a car. It literally means an animal that wasn't properly slaughtered according to the exact standards of kosher slaughter.
And also make the point that it also is not talking about obvious non-food meat like pig, snake, those kinds.
Of course, yeah.
When you say non-kosher, I don't want somebody to think, oh, that means also snakes. Why would Jews be one?
Well, no. Of course, that doesn't mean if okay. Number one, you can't do kosher slaughter on non-kosher animals. So this applies strictly to kosher animals that have the slaughtering process is either on birds, fowl, domesticated fowl, or on domesticated hooved animals that chew a cud, which would be sheep, goats, and cattle primarily. Some people they've learned how to farm buffalo, which is a kosher animal, and so on and so forth. Elk, all these different creatures. But usually, this is referring directly to domesticated animals, even birds. So, like wild birds, according to Jewish law, we don't eat those today. Like wild ducks, we typically steer away from that. But domesticated waterfowl, domesticated chickens, turkeys, cattle, sheep and goats, no problem. So in today's world, that's what we're talking about, these types of animals. This doesn't include non-kosher animals. So non-kosher animals are outside of this category. It doesn't mean that Jewish people can raise pigs and give it to their non-Jewish neighbors. We don't do that. Okay. Everybody with me? Very good. Excuse me. Okay. Halakha 5. We should provide for poor non-Jews together with poor Jews for the sake of peace. One should not rebuke non-Jews from taking leket, shchicha, and peah for the sake of peace. Okay. Leket is the stalks of grain which fall during the harvest. Shchicha is a sheaf which is forgotten in the field. So the harvesters, they go out and they're cutting down the wheat stalks and there's wheat kernels that fall to the ground, and then some of them get left on the ground because they bundle them up into sheaves. Then they stack the sheaves up on wagons or carry them off the field on donkeys or whatever method. And sometimes one would fall or get forgotten on the field. If it falls or is forgotten on the field, it's not to be retrieved. It's supposed to be left for the poor. And then peah is the corners of the fields that are to be left standing for the poor to glean from. So this, if you think about it, the righteous non-Jews that live amongst the Jewish people in the land of Israel, if they're not permitted to rent fields, then how, unless they work for Jewish people and earn a wage to buy food, then how are they going to feed themselves? And these three instances are ways that poor Jewish people and poor righteous non-Jews that live amongst Jewish people can have dignity and have an equal quality type of food and live without starving. Hashem put this into place, basically. It's a direct law from the Torah itself. It says, one may inquire about their well-being, even on their festivals, for the sake of peace. One may never repeat good wishes to them, although one should not enter the house of a non-Jew on one of his festivals to wish him well. If one encounters him in the marketplace, one may greet him meekly with a serious countenance. Halakha 6. The above matters apply. Now, we talked about this a little bit in the beginning, but this is going to get into more of it here. All the above matters apply only in an era when Israel is in exile amongst the non-Jews, or in an era when the non-Jews are in power. When, however, Israel is in power over them, it is forbidden for us to allow an idolater among us. Okay, well, I read into this wrong, the last one. I was assuming that it was talking about righteous non-Jews gleaning from the fields, but apparently it's talking about even idolaters that are amongst the Jewish people during the exile. So even God has enough mercy on them to have food from the storehouses of Israel, which is amazing, right? God's telling us not to have relationship with these people in a personal manner, but yet to treat them with enough dignity to allow them to have food. We can't save them if they're drowning, but we can let them eat.
Is it only during the exile?
Yes.
Because when everything's intact, they're not allowed to be in the land.
Right. Because idolatrous peoples, that's we started off the chapter. Idolatrous peoples, they have to either put away their idolatry, leave out of the country, or we're going to go to war with them. So even a temporary resident or a merchant who travels from place to place should not be allowed to pass through our land until he accepts the Sheva Mitzvot, the 7 universal laws commanded to Noach and his descendants. As Exodus 23:33 states, they shall not dwell in your land, for example, even temporarily. It's talking about idolaters. So a person who accepts these 7 mitzvot is a ger toshav. A ger toshav may be accepted only in the era when the laws of the Jubilee year are observed. In an era when the laws of the Jubilee year are not observed, however, we may accept only full converts to Judaism. And this was written by the Rambam 800 years ago. It's amazing. Okay, so that's we made it through chapter 10. And now we can go into discussion and question and answer. So thank you everybody online that's participated today. May you have a blessed week.